Call the meeting to order.
Sean Lucas,
Here.
Justin Orff,
Here.
Jared Giddens,
Here.
Aaron Peterson,
Here.
Darlene Graham,
Here.
Amy Hookstrat,
Here.
Please join for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Look up there.
And we will move on to our proclamation. Whereas World Down Syndrome Day has been observed on March 21st since 2012, March 21st was selected to signify the uniqueness of the triplication of the 21st chromosome, which causes Down syndrome. And whereas Down syndrome is the most common chromosomal condition diagnosed in the United States, each year about 6,000 babies are born with Down syndrome. And whereas individuals with Down syndrome have tremendous potential to live full and fulfilling lives as contributing members of our community, and whereas quality educational programs, stimulating home environments, good health care, and positive support from family, friends, and the community enable people with Down syndrome to lead fulfilling and productive lives. And whereas the City of Nixa values our citizens with Down syndrome and their families, and whereas at this time we take the opportunity to highlight the unique abilities, strengths, and needs of our community members with Down syndrome, now therefore I, Brian Steele, Mayor for the City of Nixa, do hereby proclaim March 21st, 2021 as World Down Syndrome Day in the City of Nixa. We got some of our friends here this evening.
Thank you. Thank you. Darlene's having computer issues, it looks like. Darlene's having computer issues.
Darlene's having computer issues. That's okay. She'll work on it.
Give her a paper agenda.
So proud of those young folks and all they do in our community. We also have our lead event, which is coming up. Cindy, why don't you, I don't know the date, or I would say it.
March 23rd, Lead Nixa. We'll have our next event. So please come. Starts at 6 o'clock at the Nixa X Center.
Be a great event on involving all types of people in the Nixa community. All right, we will move on to our visitor section. Do we have any visitors, Cindy?
We do. First up is Billy Romine.
Good evening. My name is Bill Romine. I reside in the Springs subdivision on North Jericho Street here in Nixa. There's been some talk in the town of a possible speed limit increase in our residential subdivision. I've been asked by a number of residents in my subdivision to inquire as to the details and, if possible, to prevent this from happening. It is my understanding that Public Works may soon present their plan to City Council. I will preface my comments with the statement that I am fully aware that I do not know what I do not know. As it stands now, exiting the driveways for homes approximately 50 yards either side of a curve at the 3 Street Weldon Greer and North Jericho intersection every morning is like a game of traffic roulette. I often park my vehicles facing the road so my teenage drivers or guests may pull out while I stand point at the top of my driveway, which is the only vantage point to be able to see both directions on oncoming traffic. The current volume of cars might be considered reasonable. However, increasing the speed limit would encourage more people to bypass the nearby school zones, cutting through the neighborhood. This would not only increase the average speed, but increase the volume of traffic and create a residential bypass expressway around the multiple schools in the area. Our subdivision has always been attractive to families with small children due to a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit, as well as the proximity to schools High Point, Summit, Century, JTSD, and the junior high. It is my understanding a traffic study has been accomplished, possibly as a result of some neighbors wishing to implement crosswalks and stop signs at various intersections in an attempt to slow traffic. It is also my understanding that this particular traffic study may be being used as justification for possibly increasing the speed limit in the neighborhood. Although I have not seen the study, the Institute of Transportation Engineers describes 3 study methodologies, all of which have real-world implications and limitations. The engineering approach, which incorporates the operating speed method, which is set within 5 miles an hour of the 85th percentile speed determined from the survey, then allowing for appropriate changes, plus or minus, based on other considerations. The other considerations is why I'm here, is often the applied approach by traffic engineers who are sometimes unaware of the depth of applicable extenuating circumstances. The other 2 methodologies would be the expert system approach, which doesn't seem to be relevant for residential neighborhoods, and the safe system approach, which is also in effect what I'm speaking to this evening, as the methodology which should be taken into consideration in addition to the engineering approach for purposes of action or non-action regarding the speed limit on North Jericho Street. In observing the traffic patterns along North Jericho Street all hours on a daily basis, common sense tells me that irrespective of any traffic study, any increase in the speed limit on Weldon or North Jericho would require 2 additional stop signs at the 3-road intersection of Weldon, North Jericho, and Greer, as well as 2 additional stop signs at the intersection of North Jericho and Welch. Increasing the speed limit without converting these 2 intersections to a 3-way stop, complete with crosswalks, would result in pedestrian or child injury, possible death, and be nothing short of, in our view, irresponsible. There is a pseudo driveway where children have played basketball and engaged in other outside activities for years just feet from that 3-street intersection. In 17 years at my present location, with the current 15-mile-an-hour speed zone in place since day one, within 50 paces of my home, I've witnessed 2 brick mailboxes destroyed by vehicles, 1 parked car totaled, numerous children endangered by speeders. I often slow cars who are otherwise unaware of the children playing just around the blind curve. I recall one child leaping from the sidewalk edge to the ditch to avoid an inattentive speeder. On more than one occasion, cars skidding around the curve sideways due to excessive speed. On a personal note, I've seen the inside of a 4-year-old skull, which connected with an out-of-nowhere speeder on a 30-mile-an-hour residential street. I've heard the "he's not going to make it" conversation between an ER doc and a mother. I was 7 years old, standing less than 3 feet from my brother when it happened. My brother survived, with scars. Let me say, it stays with you. It was the primary factor in my reasoning for purchasing, residing, and raising my family in Nixa, in the Springs, with a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit. To my understanding, this is simply a proposal to, in a neighborhood with a dangerous curve, full of children, bicycles, elderly pedestrians, increase traffic, and then ask them to all go faster. I've heard similar concerns from residents on North Althea on the west side of the subdivision. I would respectfully ask City Council and encourage Public Works to reconsider this contemplated action of increasing speed and instead mitigate any existing danger further by adding the aforementioned stop signs and crosswalks. We would like to keep the Springs a safe, family-focused neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know, Doug, if you have any comment or I hadn't heard anything about this, so.
We do have one traffic engineering study, as he mentioned, and we've asked another firm to also do one. We're doing a second one, just to make sure. The one that we have it's a couple years old, and we took right after, I'm blank, Old Castle opened all the way to see how that changed traffic patterns. We did a lot of studies around there. So we're doing another one right now with another one of our consulting firms, and that's as far as we've gone.
Okay.
We haven't had any more internal discussions about it.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Ron Sanders.
Good evening. My name is Ron Sanders. I live at 976 Glen Oaks Drive, and I'd like to talk to you all about people tonight. Our Constitution guarantees us a Republican form of government at all levels. That's very important because it does keep three separate branches, in checks and balances. Checks and balances are necessary because not everybody returns the shopping cart. Okay, what I'm referring to is the shopping cart theory of society. You can tell a community or a society what level of self-responsibility they are by taking a look at all of the grocery stores and super stores and seeing, how they conduct themselves when they're taking and returning shopping carts. Because it is no burden. Somebody else will return it if you don't. You're not going to get in trouble if you don't. But understanding your role in your community by returning that shopping cart makes life better for everybody and keeps things in order. If the world was perfect, we could probably have a shopping cart type of government. But the world is not perfect. People are not perfect. And we all know that. So we do have to have some rules. When we're making these rules, there are some considerations that must be had, and one of the first considerations, whether we think about it or not, is do we consider our community, the people in our community, good people, and we just have to hold accountability those that stray, or do we need to make a rule to force everybody to behave in a certain way? That is where a lot of governments go wrong, and that is where I've seen a lot of the school districts and their rules for their school boards and everything go wrong. They set up their school districts and their school boards to treat everybody as if they need to be ruled over instead of held accountable. Tonight we're considering Robert's Rules of Order for conducting our business here tonight. And some of the stuff in there I'll talk about later is a little bit concerning, because some of the parts of that ordinance and some of the rules that we've adopted are leaning more towards treating people as if they need to be told how to conduct themselves, rather than holding them accountable if they misconduct themselves. And that goes right back to the shopping cart thing. I've lived in Nixa for 3 years. I've lived in this area for, 8 or 9. Lived all over the world. We have a very good shopping cart situation in our community. And that's one of the reasons that I chose this place, and that's one of the reasons I chose to stay here, is because almost everybody returns the shopping cart. Almost everybody understands the importance of returning that shopping cart. And just to kind of go on what the previous gentleman said, traffic. People are a little bit more courteous around here than most places, and they, except for a few places, they do slow down and they do consider, people pulling in and out. As traffic gets worse, it's going to become a problem because people will try to find alternate avenues to get to work quickly, and they will disregard those speed limits until the traffic study people decide that those speed limits have to be faster. And pressure will be put on the city government to make those faster, because we can't make 160 bigger, we can't, make 14 bigger very fast, and we can't find other ways to get up to Springfield to our jobs. That's where the city council should always have oversight and the last say on everything, even if it's just a final vote. And the people that elect you here, hopefully, look at you as pillars of the community and good people that will make those rules and make those decisions based on the shopping cart theory, where we consider everybody good and people just need to be held accountable, rather than making rules where we have to try to force people with the force of government to behave a certain way. I hope that that's the case, and I hope that's the direction we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. Anyone else? We will leave the public hearing open, or the visitor section open. If anyone else would like to speak, they can do so at this time. All right, we will close the visitor section and move on to our presentations. Anna.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Anna Evans with Show Me Christian County Economic Development. Good to be here with you in the first quarter of 2022. A few things to go ahead and hit on. I know we have included both our January and February board reports in your packet. We're about to present our March board report, so we are just moving right along, but there are a few things that I want to highlight. And instead of going down through those reports that you have for reference, there's basically a few things that I want to pull out and talk a little bit more about. And I'll be pretty brief, but I do want to leave it open for questions as well. So if anyone has questions about anything we're talking about or any, projects we mentioned, please feel free to ask. First of all, I want to make sure to recognize again those who are involved, not just on Nixa City staff, but those community leaders in Nixa who are very involved. We recently had and quite often have the opportunity as a community, as a county, to participate in larger regional conversations about, whether it's economic development or community efforts and collaborations and things. And Nixa always does a fantastic job of making sure that your community is represented and part of those conversations. So thank you very much. Cindy Robbins and Chris Russell with the Nixa Chamber both recently were able to join us at Show Me Christian County's table at the annual meeting of the Springfield Business Development Corporation. And so just wanted to say again, thank you to Nixa and to the community for being a proactive and very active participant in our larger regional conversations. It is really important and people do notice and are glad that Nixa's at the table. So thank you again. We talked a little bit, I know last time I was here, I talked about kind of how Show Me as an organization and as an economic development collaborative partnership has done a lot of work over the past few years, but as you all know, Show Me still is a bit relatively new compared to other organizations that we have. We've been in operation since 2018, and at the end of 2021, we were to the point that we had about 3.5 full-time staff. We had a part-time staff person, and we're really getting to the point where we're excited about kind of moving from talking about and educating on economic development internally to our local citizens and being able to pivot and move external and say, hey, businesses and residents and professionals and folks who have talents outside of our area, here's why our area is super cool and why you should come, lend your talent to us, be part of our community and do business here. So to that end, we were able to partner, again, Nixa was a partner with us on this, to produce I thought, really well done video that Show Me Christian County helped facilitate to help market Christian County, both businesses and to professionals outside our region. So we live in a great place, and we want everyone else to know that we live in a great place and why the folks who live here and do business here also think it's a great place to live and do business. So we do have a link to that video on our Facebook page. It's going to be on our Show Me Christian County YouTube channel by the end of this week, and I don't want to watch the whole thing right now for you, but I do want to let you know it's out there. And several very, very well-spoken and fantastic community leaders in the Nixa community represented on that video. So do encourage you to go watch it. And again, please do ask if you have questions about that. One thing that we're able to do as an organization, again, in partnership with all of our various communities and municipalities, is to participate in some forward thinking when it comes to economic issues. And one specific way we're able to do that is by looking at our businesses' business continuity plans. So in partnership with our Christian County Emergency Management Office, they, of course, those fantastic folks do a great job at looking at life safety issues, what happens in a natural disaster and how do we make sure that our families and our citizens are taken care of. What Show Me is able to do is come on the business side of things and say, okay, not a life safety issue. You know, I'm not a fire marshal. I can't tell you how to make sure your employees are safe in XYZ circumstance. But what I can tell you is if there's, you know, some kind of major disaster or interruption or something like that, do you and your business have a plan and a continuity workaround in place to be able to make sure that you're able to continue those critical functions of your business in the event of a widespread, you know, interruption of some sort? So, as an organization, we are able to work with businesses, whether in a group or on an individual basis, to make sure that those plans are in place, or to even evaluate and update those plans and make sure that they're taking various situations into account. So, do encourage everyone, if you have any organization or business, but especially our municipalities and our businesses, we want to be sure that that resource is available to them. And more information, like I said, will be forthcoming about that service that we're able to offer. But we are constantly going through various continuing education and certifications and making sure that we're up to date on making sure that we're able to be that resource for our business community. Show Me is also happy to participate overall, again, in Christian County's comprehensive planning process. Christian County, the entity, is going through that long-term comprehensive planning process in partnership with the Southwest Missouri Council of Governments right now. Show Me is a part of that conversation, and again, want to make sure that we, in the hat that we wear, I suppose, in that room of representing the business and the economic interests of all our communities, are happy to be part of that process. So that is ongoing. If anyone has any questions about that, I would be happy to answer, but I do want to bring up that very soon, I don't have the dates because I don't know if they're 100% confirmed, but very soon, through that SIMCOG process, there will be a couple of open public feedback sessions where SIMCOG is assisting the county with holding some open sessions. I believe they'll both be at the Sparta and the Clever library branches, and they want to hear from folks in the county. So folks here who are concerned citizens, if you want to have your voice heard whenever the county is going through that long-term planning process, you will be invited to come bring your feedback and make sure that your voice is heard at those public sessions. And please be on the lookout for when those dates will be announced. But again, those should be scheduled for both the Sparta Library branch and the Clever Library branch to visit those. And then finally, other thing to bring to your attention, Saturday, April 2nd, the county has asked that we be sure to spread the word. There's been a lot of work done on some of the county property and infrastructure surrounding it on the downtown square in Ozark. There will be a ribbon cutting at 10 a.m. Saturday, April 2nd. And again, the county wants to be sure that everyone is invited to come out to celebrate some of the cool new upgrades and improvements to that infrastructure and to those facilities that are there. And we would love to see you there in representation from Nixa as well. With that, I will open it up and just ask if anyone has any questions.
Any questions? Nope, I think we're good.
All right, thank you very much.
And we'll move on to our next presentation, Chief.
There we go. Bear with me.
Just turn it on.
It appears to be on, but let's see. Okay. Technical difficulty. Macy, could you potentially bring me something that works?
I think this one's dead.
Okay.
I'll just cue you when I move
Macy will
next
tab
slide.
forward. Yes.
We'll find a workaround. Hey, you didn't hire me for my technical expertise. Mayor, Council, as you know, we try to bring to you every year an annual report. And what I call this is kind of a 10,000-foot view of the police department. It gives you a wide variety of facts and statistics about our police department. It touches on things like calls for service, the type of work we're doing, the amount of work we're doing, how we're structured, things of that nature. It's also nice to see those things in comparison from year to year, so we can kind of see where things are going, and you can also kind of judge how well you're doing to some degree. I provided the entire document as a PDF, and what I did was I pulled out what I wanted to talk about this evening and highlight in the form of a PowerPoint presentation. So we'll go through these slides, and then, of course, if you have any questions, I can answer any questions at the end. The first slide that you see here is this is a very good slide to put up. It really shows where we are as far as an organization and the manpower and personnel that we have within our police department. If you look there, you can see that if you look at the stats, you can see that most of our experienced officers are at the top of the organization, which is not uncommon. But what I will point out is that we are a very young department, and you can see that how many of those line level staff are 0 to 4 years. And so that paints a picture that we have a young department, and one might say, well, you don't have a lot of experience. And I would say, yes, you're right, we don't. But we also look at it as an opportunity because we have young people in the organization that can grow, and we can train them, and they're going to fulfill those roles as they move up through their years in service and longevity. Also, you might see on there how many new hires we hired in 2021. We tried very hard. I will give Lieutenant Fleetwood a lot of credit for the recruiting perspective. He did quite a bit of work in that, and we were able to hire and fulfill several of our positions that were open. At the end of the year, we were full but one, all but one. And so that was we knew that was going to take a long time, and it was going to take most of the year to do that. But we did a really good job of getting those particular spots filled. And then at the very end, at the bottom there, you'll see the promotions. And of course, as we have turnover, attrition, and sometimes opportunities through restructure, and in our department, we have opportunity for promotion, and you can see the individuals that were promoted within the organization. And so they're all doing a great job, and we're happy that they took the opportunity to seek that next level in the organization. And again, it goes back to that development aspect. Macy, can I have the next slide? This slide in particular will talk about, this is the meat and potatoes. This is the body of work that we do in the police department. And you can see the number that I highlight there is the calls for service. Over 41,000 calls for service. That eclipses the prior year, and it is a record. It seems like I say that every year when it comes to calls for service. We continue to see an increase in that call volume, and that's the demand. Of course, we all know in this room why that's happening. We continue to grow as a community, and so the more people we have living in our city and doing business in our city, the more they're going to need our police services. Interesting, we broke it down just to kind of digest that 41,000 number, and you look at those averages, and you get all the way down to a shift, and you're seeing that on a daily basis, on a shift-to-shift basis, we're taking 56 calls for service. So that's a lot of calls for service. Now, those don't always translate into an arrest, obviously, or a report, but we are being asked to do something as a police department that many times per shift. Next slide, Macy. This particular slide really breaks down and shows you what we kind of give you on a month-to-month basis, but it's 3-year comparisons, and it's just in a different format so that you can digest it. I will point out to you that a lot of the things that you're seeing here, if you're seeing an increase in those particular numbers, it has a lot to do with our proactive versus reactive approach. And as we continue to come out of the pandemic, we started going back to business as usual. There was some normalcy in how we were conducting business and the proactivity, and that's reflected in a lot of those numbers that you see. I will point out one particular stat there is DWI charges. You can see that those were up dramatically. And I can tell you that is the direct effort of a few very caring officers that really have a passion for that type of work. And so what I would tell you is that those DWIs were probably always there in our community. We just got a lot better at catching them. And then the other thing that you'll kind of note as well on this particular slide is the reports. And you can see that we're continuing to write more reports. That is time away that you have to take from doing, the proactive side of things. It's the reactive work that you have to do. It's the documentation, and you can see that that's increasing as well. But it certainly is a fraction of the overall number of calls for service that we actually write reports on. Macy, can I have yes, thank you. And so to kind of drill down a little bit deeper, I know that we don't give a lot of direct stats on, particular crimes. And so I wanted to give you a brief overview of just some major categories. And then I have some additional data if you have a specific question about anything in particular. But you can see what I've noted here is in 2021, our violent crime trended downward. And we saw a notable drop in assaults in particular. Again, we only had one homicide last year. That's a good thing. We had one prior homicide the year before. Of course, we'd like that to be zero. And then when it comes to property crime, it stayed about the same. However, we did see a slight uptick in vehicle theft, or vehicle parts theft, and those were mainly catalytic converters. So if you've watched the news lately, you may have seen that the Springfield Police Department, along with some other federal agencies, did a large sting operation and shut down a lot of the activity that was going on with catalytic converter theft. There was a multi-million-dollar operation, and that alone we've seen the indirect benefit of that as well. So we're starting to see those things kind of calm back down. And then finally, the last offenses are the drug offenses. And what I would tell you is that was the most notable increase that we saw. And so whenever you look at our data, we had a lot more drug charges and a lot more drug offenses, whether they were misdemeanor or felony. And again, we continue to see methamphetamine and marijuana as the two primary drugs that we're encountering. A little bit of heroin, not much, luckily. And, because that's certainly something you don't want to see in your community. Again, some of this could be directly related to proactivity and enforcement. So if you're aggressive with your drug investigations and drug work, you can certainly drive those numbers up. Macy, can I have the next slide? Here you can see traffic enforcement, and what I did is I highlighted that number. You can see that last year we did over 11,000 traffic stops, 11,700 something traffic stops. My eyes are a little blurry, I apologize. Those particular traffic stops can be broken out in a variety of different things, and as far as reasons for stop, and I've kind of articulated that there. And then if you look at that 3-year average, you can see that it kind of ebbs and flows, and again, that kind of goes directly, it's in line with, what we were doing with the pandemic. Obviously, at the height of the pandemic, we did not want people out there making direct contact for very minor violations if we could avoid that. Macy, next slide. And then going on from that particular data, you can see we're working with crash data here, and you can see right here that 329 vehicle crashes. We only had one fatality, which is good news. We typically don't have a lot of fatalities. I know that a lot of emphasis was put on flashing yellow lights particularly at some of our intersections, and we did see some increases in crashes there for injuries, and I believe that one fatality was at an intersection where that occurred. But I can't be 100% positive about that one particular fatality. But again, these are all in line with years past, and you can see on the pie chart, it kind of gives you some of the contributing circumstances for the crashes. But again, nothing dramatically changing from year to year on this data as well. Macy, go ahead. And this is just another way to look at vehicle stops, warnings, and tickets. And I always include this because I think it's very telling. And if you look at this data and you digest it a little bit, you can see that when we have times of high enforcement, whether that's through tickets or warnings, you can see that crashes tend to subside during that period, immediately following. And then whenever we have less enforcement action, whether it be tickets or warnings, you can see that you start seeing the crashes trending upward. So what this proves is that traffic enforcement does work, and it does make the streets safer. Go ahead, Macy. And then, of course, this is always a topic of discussion in this day and age, is use of force. And what I would tell you about this is that of those 41,000 calls for service, you know, we make a number of arrests. And then when you look at the number of arrests that we actually use force to affect, I mean, we're down to 22 particular incidents where we physically used force to take someone into custody. And that's a very small number. It's like 3% of the time. And so we don't use a lot of force here in the city, and I would attribute that to the way we do business. We use a methodology called contact cover, and that ensures that we have multiple officers in those scenarios, and most of the time people comply when they're outnumbered. And so, you know, if we were conducting business differently, it might be a one-on-one situation, and we may be seeing some different results from that. But contact cover is a methodology that we've been using for 20 years, at least since I've been here. Go ahead, Macy. And then finally, you can see here, transitioning over to more the support side of the investigation side, you can see we gave you a 3-year average, or 3 years of data for the types of cases that we're assigning. When we look at a case, we use solvability factors, and so when you have a particular case that has a lot of solvability factors, you would assign that case to potentially be investigated. If it doesn't have a lot of solvability factors, we won't push that onto the detective or the investigator to pursue. But you can see that our clearance rate, which is the thing that we're most proud of, has gone up dramatically. You know, we increased that by quite a bit from last year to this year. And so they're doing a lot of hard work over there. It may not seem like a lot of cases, but you got to remember that we only have 3 active investigators doing those cases. So a lot of caseload for those 3 individuals. And the work that they're doing is not, you know, it's not the preliminary report, it's all the extra stuff that has to be done to get these things buttoned up and ready to be prosecuted. And then another thing that we could be particularly proud of at the police department is our, we talk about professional standards or our complaints. And when we look at the number of complaints that we receive and the number of formal complaints we receive, we took 3 formal complaints in the entire year last year. That's pretty good. Now, that's not to say that we didn't have people complain, but we took 3 formal complaints. So they went through the formality of actually going through and filling out a complaint and having that investigated through professional standards. And then you can see the results of those complaints being 2 of them, I think, one was unfounded, 2 were not sustained. And we give descriptions of what those are in the report. So very proud of that information as well. That tells me that our officers are doing a good job out there. They're doing the job of policing this community the way the public and I expect them to do that. Go ahead. And then last, on this particular slide, you're going to see that we're talking about training hours. Training is very important, obviously, and we spend a lot of time doing that. And so when we look at the number of hours that we're giving our officers versus the number of hours maybe you're getting at another agency or something of that nature, we're very proud of the fact that we met all of our post requirements, which is a good thing because you get put on probation when you don't. So we've done that, and we were able to give a lot of different types of training. We covered a lot of different areas this year. CIT training in particular was a big deal, crisis intervention team training, and so we were proud of those. And then finally, go ahead, Macy. Animal control, I threw this in here because, a lot of times we overlook the animal control and our community service officers' efforts. And you can see that in this slide, we had a pretty good uptick on the number of animal calls that we're taking. We did work 17 animal bites. We took 132 dogs in, and we returned all of them but 20. So 20 of them were not returned to owners, but they did go to a no-kill shelter, which we've been doing for many years now. Go ahead, Macy. Records division, again, kind of unsung heroes of the department. You can see on this particular slide the number of records that are being produced and being processed. Our officers do a really good job in the field, taking this information, producing a police report, but a lot of times that police report has to go other places. And so there's a lot of back-end work done by only three people in the department are handling that. And so they're disseminating those reports to multiple agencies, to the prosecutor's office. They're making sure that records are being given to the public in a timely manner. They're producing video evidence and making sure that that video evidence is getting to the prosecutor as well. And then on the other side of evidence, you can see they also take in and process a lot of evidence throughout the course of the year. And so if you go to the far right, you can see that under items taken in, we took in almost 2,800 items of evidence into our evidence room last year. Again, it may not seem like a lot of work, but it certainly does translate into a lot of effort by our staff. Go ahead, Macy. And then just to highlight some of the things that we did throughout the year. Again, normally these pages would be filled with quite a few more public events and things of that nature, but we really scaled back in the last couple of years on that. And so we felt like this last year was a little bit, again, return to normalcy. And so we were able to do some things that we didn't do in the past. And I continue to think that we're going to be moving in the direction where we'll be able to engage the public even more in the coming year. But we did have a very successful program called Cops Connecting with Kids. And we gave officers an opportunity to go out, meet kids, where they're at, whether it's on the street playing basketball, community center, places where kids were hanging out. And then the officers were given T-shirts that we could approach them, initiate a conversation, give them a T-shirt, and kind of talk to them and engage the young people of the community. Friday Night Lights, you can see that that was the first year we participated in that. We actually won that event, so we got a little plaque and a check as a result of that, so that was nice. Again, it was a great event for us, and anytime that we can have some friendly competition with our law enforcement partners across the county, we're going to do that. And maybe it's just me, I'm competitive, I want to win. As I told him, I was like, whatever we got to do to get first place. Go ahead, Macy. And then we were able to start our Citizens Police Academy up again. I know there was a lot of demand for that. There's a lot of interest in it. We were kind of waffling back and forth whether we were going to do it, we weren't going to do it. Kind of from week to week, we weren't, we were seeing some things being told to us, about, where we were with coronavirus and things of that nature. Ultimately, we made the decision to do it, and we had a great group of people, and those people are still several of them are actively engaged in our alumni. So good to have that back, and we look forward to recruiting at NIXPO for that this coming week. I will point out that we did land on a safe city list again. That's always nice to get a feather in your cap. I think we were number 13 on the safe cities list. And if you look at the actual relative size of our city versus some of our competition, we were probably the largest city in the top 10 for that matter. So nice accolade. Go ahead, Macy. And then I talked a little bit about Cit certification. That was something that we got several of our officers through. And we're proud of the fact that we're moving toward training more of our officers in dealing with crisis intervention. And we're going to expand that this year. NTOA conference, that was something that we hadn't gone to in a while. On a biannual basis, we give external training to our SWAT team. That's a high-risk situation. It's a low-frequency, high-risk situation. It's always good to get external training, go out, find conferences where people are doing new, unique things to solve these kinds of really critical incidents. Always a good information that we glean from these kinds of conferences. And then we have the Christmas parade down there again. That green car gets a lot of airtime, doesn't it? I guess because it's so shiny and bright. And again, we participate in the Christmas parade every year. Finally, you see here, we did Shop with a Cop. We actually did Shop with a Hero in 2 different places this year. We did one with Walmart, and then later, Academy Sports in Springfield reached out, and we participated in that event as well. And so we had 2 separate opportunities to do that. Go ahead, Macy. That's it. So I gave you a lot of information. Is there anything in particular you have a question about it, and when it comes to annual report?
I know I ask this probably every 6 months, but it goes back towards the training thing. How are things going with, your training at APT and things like that as far as range time and things like that? Is it getting harder? Are they getting busier?
We're not having real difficulty with that particular training. I will tell you that we did run into one problem over the summer. We had a particular officer at APT get some heat exhaustion, and we found out real quick that medical services down there they don't come quickly. And so we ended up transporting our officer to the paramedics instead of having the paramedics come to us. So we did some basic first aid and then put that officer in a vehicle and took them to the paramedics rather than waiting on them to show up where we were at. But outside of that, we really haven't had too many problems with them so far. We do work around their schedule because it is a for-profit organization, and so we kind of have to be available or flexible when it comes to his particular scheduling.
And how's Jack doing? I know there were some ups and downs in the beginning with a new canine, but
Yeah, he's doing great. He's a great dog. He's very aggressive when it comes to his drive. We did have an unfortunate incident in a training session where our canine handler was bitten by Jack. It was not Jack's fault. Our handler actually said, it was my fault. I made a miscommunication. I made a miscue, and he reacted just like he was supposed to. But outside of that, our canine officer is back in service, and he's working again. But outside of that, we've had really good success with him, and it's a different direction that we've had in the past with our canine dogs. And I will tell you that although it may be more training, more liability to some degree because of the bite aspect or the patrol part of it, I think it's worth it. When we do the analysis, we go, the tool is worth the effort that we put into it.
thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you, Chief.
Yep.
Two places. We'll move on to our first readings. Whenever you're ready, Cindy.
First reading, Council Bill Number 2022-031, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa authorizing the mayor to execute a franchise agreement, lease agreement, and operations and maintenance agreement, and other related agreements with the Missouri Joint Municipal Electric Utility Corporation to facilitate the transfer of certain electric transmission assets to said corporation.
That's a mouthful. I believe I mentioned that this was coming a few weeks ago. The Missouri Joint Municipal Electric Utility Commission, we affectionately call MUJMUC. It's the acronym, so it's always, it's a fun joke around Missouri utilities, but they're in the process of purchasing the 69 kV assets that we had sold to Grid Alliance in 2018. Upon the sale of the assets, when we sold them to Grid Alliance, we entered into several agreements. If you'll remember, there were a couple of you that weren't on council at that time. But we had several agreements, including a master services agreement, a pole attachment agreement, substation agreement, those types of things, because they don't have a local presence. And so what we would do is we would trade some in-kind services for us being able to use the substation because they own the property where our substations are at. And so we did some in-kind trade there. Looking back on it, I think they had the better end of the deal. So not by a lot. It's not like we subsidized them a lot, but it seemed like we had a few more hours in it than what probably would have been an appropriate rent. Anyway, to complete the sale between Gridlights and Mudgemuck, we need to put new agreements in place between the City of Nixa and the Missouri Joint Electric Utility Corporation. And we need to do those. We've got 5 of those here for you tonight. We've worked very close with their counsel and their consulting engineer. And when I say we, Mr. Woodman, Brian Denny, Chris, James Owens, some of my electric guys and myself have worked with them to come up with these agreements so they can close on this sale. They're shooting for the end of March, and so we needed to go ahead and get this in tonight. I'll quickly go through. I made a mistake on my memo that I caught. There's 4. My memo says there's 4 agreements. There's actually 5. I think what happened is at the 11th hour we snuck another agreement in there. So anyway, the first one, Section 1, which is Council Bill Exhibit A, is a franchise agreement. Most third-party utilities, and similar to this transmission line, most of that facility is located on either city public right-of-way or MoDOT right-of-way. And so therefore, there are no easements where those are at. Because we owned them, we didn't need the easements, they were on public right-of-way. So to be able to fix that, to allow Mudgemuck to have their facilities in our rights-of-way, you have the power to grant them a franchise agreement, which is the first thing that's in there. That is set out by city charter. It has a 20-year maximum time frame. Of course, it can be reissued in 20 years. There are a few things that, if they were completely sideways, they wouldn't be eligible, but that's hardly the case when you have transmission assets like that they're going to have to be there for long after we're gone because they're fundamental to the operations. Section 2 is Council Bill Exhibit B, which is a lease agreement. This is actually a 99-year agreement. It's necessary for us to continue to operate and maintain our distribution equipment located within their substation property. We have, of course, the step-down transformer, the high side and low side bus. We've got distribution breakers, reclosers, those types of things. But we also have shared equipment. The brown-looking rock buildings, if you've seen those, they have equipment inside of them. They have station power batteries, those types of things. And those are shared. And the reason because they're used for the actual metering operations, the reclosure operations, station power, those types of things if you had to have a cold start. And so this agreement also lays out the particulars of that. The difference is what we will do is we've actually split out the areas to where we would pay them rent for our piece of that, and then we would in turn, some of the operations that we'll do from them, they will actually pay us for it. We'll do a monthly billing setup is what we'll do. So as an example, for the substation rent, we came up with a way to figure that based on the square footage of the property. We knew what the value of the properties were, so on each of those properties, we figured out what portion of it the City of Nixa actually used. So as an example, at the Tracker Sub, we used 1,100 square feet of the total 28,500 square feet. So roughly just under 4%. What we will pay for rent is 12% of the value of that property, or 12% of our 3.86% of that property. So it's roughly about $600 for an annual lease for that particular piece. All 4 substations, the annual rent will be $5,751.26. So I felt that was very reasonable for what we have in there. virtually have millions of dollars of equipment inside there, so that's well worth it. Section 3, or Exhibit C, is an operations and maintenance agreement. That's the flip side. This one lays out all of the operations that we will do locally for them, somewhat like a subcontractor or a contractor. Eventually, Mudgemuck will have their own crews. This is a number of years in the future, but they're working on it now. They're developing line crews and probably some substation crews. So at some point, this agreement may go away and we might not have to do this anymore. But for now, we'll go ahead and do this. There's labor rates installed in there. There are also in Exhibit E, and then Exhibit F has all of the equipment values based on FEMA numbers, which is the same thing we would use for mutual aid. We use those particular numbers because they need those in their accounting to be able to report back to FERC for their tariff. So we will do all of this based on their accounting principles. In particular, they will supply all the materials, and which some of those they're already planning on buying, and they'll store them on site. They'll probably put a Connex building or something out there with some of that, which is one thing Grid Alliance did not do. And then what we will do is, if we get in an emergency and we need to supplement a piece, then they'll just reimburse us for our cost plus a little administrative fee, depending on what that is. But initially, it doesn't look like we're going to have to worry about that. And they're talking about having ample materials on hand. The last two are really fairly simple, and they're really more of a cleanup than anything else. Section 4, which is Exhibit D, termination of a substation easement. We actually need to terminate the easement from Grid Alliance. So this will need to be recorded at the Recorder of Deeds office before we can do the other one with Mudgemuck. That one's fairly cut dry, as is the last one, which is assignment of easements, which is Exhibit E. I almost had to chuckle when this one came up, but at the same time, I missed it like everybody else did, including I don't know how many attorneys. When we did assignment of easements, when we sold our transmission system to Grid Alliance, the exhibit that got inserted in the final closing documents listed no easements on the exhibit. So they've actually owned this, they've owned the transmission line and easements that are actually ours, they still don't have them. So we need to turn around and we need to assign those easements to Mudgemuck. Now, not to confuse you, I mentioned we needed a franchise agreement because there weren't any easements. These particular easements, most of these go from the substation at Monet up to the James River Power Plant, so they're outside of our city limits where we don't have rights of way. Now, there's a couple internal, but most of them are out in that location. So I want to bring this to you at your next meeting for a second reading, and I'm going to recommend approval of it. But until then, I'm open for any questions you might have. I know this is big. It's 109 pages. I'm sorry, but we could have piecemealed this and done 5 different ordinances, but I appreciate Nick and Penny Speak with Healy Law. They were able to put all this together in one piece. We will have to come back to you later on and do a pole attachment agreement. So, but that doesn't need to be done for them to close.
Any questions? Thank you, Doug.
Thanks.
And we'll open the public hearing if you would like to speak to these items. And close the public hearing. And move on whenever you're ready, Cindy.
First reading, Council Bill Number 2022-032, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa granting a franchise to operate a natural gas distribution system within the city to Spire, Missouri Incorporated.
Similar to what we just talked about, Spire, formerly Missouri Gas Energy, has had a longstanding franchise agreement to be able to have their gas lines within our city rights of way. That term is up. It's time to renew that. And so this This agreement would be a franchise agreement, and what's laid out in the actual agreement is the minimum standards that they need to do and those types of things. And it also lays out the payments where, and how those are figured. They actually pay us 5% on their gross revenue or gross sales within the city limits. So they actually pay us for an annual basis on that. Again, it's a 20-year franchise, and it will probably come back to you in 20 years. Spire's very good. Of all the third-party utility companies that dig in our rights-of-way, they probably do the best job as far as staying on top of it, cleaning up, doing what they should do. So they're very easy to work with.
Any questions?
What would be a scenario where we wouldn't do, and maybe we already have and I've just forgotten, but wouldn't do 20 years?
Well,
Because I know that's the max.
you mean
and it-
do a shorter period
Yeah.
of time?
Yeah.
I think for me to recommend a shorter time, it would be an uncertainty of the utility probably for the most part. Maybe they're new. You'd want to make sure that, they are credible, do what they, work responsibly, those types of things. And there are a few things actually laid out. Well, there are actually a few items, minimum standards that they have to meet within that. Of course, obviously payment, that type of thing. So we'd need to keep a handle on it. But for the most of the ones that we have out there today, I have no problem with a 20-year at all.
Maybe some of the tower attachments and things like that, maybe we've had shorter terms in the past.
We have had.
Justin was just reminding me how old I'll be when this one is over, so I just curious.
At least he didn't tell you how old I'd be.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Doug. And we will open up the public hearing. Close the public hearing. Any further discussion? I forgot that last time. All right, we'll move on to 2022-033.
First reading, Council Bill Number 2022-033, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa authorizing the city administrator to execute a contract with the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission to provide federal surface transportation block grant funding for certain improvements on North Main Street.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. I'm coming back to you tonight to ask for an ordinance being passed for the same agreement that we discussed at our February 28th meeting. The resolution that was passed did allow us to enter into an agreement with the Transportation Department for surface transportation block grant funds to construct North Main Street. Shortly after the resolution was passed, we were told by the Department of Transportation that for them to be able to issue those funds to us, that we needed to pass this as an ordinance. No other reason was given to us for this, other than this is how they have always done it, and this is how they would like to move forward. So we're bringing this back to you tonight and asking you to pass this as an ordinance.
One of MoDOT's favorite answers. That's how we've always done it.
Because we can.
Yes. Any questions? Thank you, Jeff. And we'll open up public hearing. Close the public hearing. Any further discussion? Nope. Thank you very much. All right, move on to second reading, please.
Second reading, Council Bill Number 2022-027, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa amending Chapter 2 of the Nixa City Code to add provisions related to the procedures of the City Council.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. We conducted first reading of this ordinance, or this council bill, at the February 28th City Council meeting. It's now up for second reading and potential for final passage. As stated at that meeting, the intent of this bill is to codify and provide written rules of procedure for the City Council and the conduct of its business. The intent here is to provide the rules in a transparent manner, where it's written in a place that can be referenced and available for everybody to see in case disputes or issues arise. I'm happy to answer any questions that the council may have, and staff recommends approval of this.
Any questions? Yeah, no. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, we'll open a public hearing if you would like to speak to this item.
My name's Ron Sanders. Once again, I still live at 976 Glen Oaks Drive.
So you don't have to say your address, you can just say you live in Nixa.
Well, that's one of the things
Change
that
that
one of the things we're going to talk about is, just to open it up and put it on the table, there is a provision in there where you have to give your address, and I believe we talked about that in the past. We put it on the piece of paper. Why do we have to speak it?
I think I asked Mr. Whitman about that last time, and he had an answer for that.
Yes, you did ask about that, Mayor, and if you read the text of the ordinance, it just says provide. Writing it on the piece of paper would be providing the address.
So writing it on the paper takes the place of saying it.
Okay, good. Now, there was a couple of other things that kind of concerned me on this ordinance, and that is, the big one is where are ordinances coming from? And, you know, as a Republican form of government, in all levels of government, ordinances, laws are started as bills by legislators, which would be the city council members. Now, watching these guys get up and talk about budget amendments and everything, I realize there would have to be two classes of ordinances. You would have to have legislative ordinances or, you know, legal ordinances, and then you would have operational ordinances, where, you know, operational ordinances would have to come from the staff and would have to, you know, be generated, you know, because that's all budgetary, that's all how things are being operated. But whenever it comes to ordinances that would be considered laws, you know, that would create punishment, would create fines and fees and stuff like that on citizens. I know, Nick, you're not going to be the lawyer forever for the city, but maybe instead of the lawyer writing up the ordinance and saying, hey, I want you to pass this, maybe selling the idea to the city council members and working with the city council members so that they would submit the bills, you know, as ordinances. That way the city council members would be originating the bills to become law, the ordinances, you know, to actually be codified, to start punishing the citizens. Because if I was a lawyer and I wanted to make my job, you know, important, then I would be coming up with all kinds of rules and all kinds of ordinances to pass. And when was the last time you all saw one of these things come up here where the staff did not recommend it to be passed?
Mini pigs.
What's that?
Mini pigs. That was the bill sponsor.
That was the last one?
I don't know if that was the last one, but that's the most.
But I mean, it's been a very long time because staff is the one that's giving you all the information. And where is it contested? Where is it actually argued? Where is the other side ever presented? Besides me being here, have y'all had that opportunity to mesh out a lot of the issues, you know, get competing ideas in there and stuff like that. But my biggest thing here would be, you know, where are the ordinances originating? I do like the Roberts rules. The one thing that concerned me was the sergeant at arms. And I know we already have the police in the back there, but making them an official part of the procedure could cool the speech. And we do want to have, you know, maybe aggressive, maybe passionate, very well-intentioned speech here. And I don't think that we would want to put anything in our laws or in our ordinances that would cool the people's speech. Because not everybody's going to be here, you know, 10, 15 years from now. And we don't know what the intentions of the future seat holders would have. And whether or not they would actually use a sergeant at arms, you know, to shut somebody up or to keep somebody from speaking because they're, you know, they're very oppositional or they're very combative. So these things should be considered before we actually pass all of this, because once it's there, it's going to be there, and it'll be very hard to reverse, especially for people hungry for power and people who want to use power to control things. So just some things to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. On the Sergeant of Arms, I think the chief has always been the Sergeant of Arms. We just didn't ever had it documented anywhere. And the way that reads, the Sergeant of Arms doesn't have any authority. They have authority to act on behalf of the officiator or the presiding officer of the meeting. So it would have to be myself or Mr. Giddens was in charge. Whoever was in charge would have to direct them. It's not something they would do themselves, which I think is kind of the idea, the way we would want it to work. As far as the offering up of ordinances, I do definitely understand what you say. That is the way they do it in Ozark, is that the individual council members bring forth. They do that in lots of other cities as well. We've utilized for a long time, at least 10 years, the liaison system, where the council members meet with the liaisons, meet with their staff liaison, come up with the ideas for certain ordinances or changes, or their staff presents to them certain ordinances or changes, and that's how we do it. So we don't do it during the meeting, we do it beforehand, and then that's where the ideas and support for the ordinances come from.
That part's not in.
True.
Now you have a direct, the city administrator.
Yeah, sir, come back up.
The city, in there, it specifically says the city administrator, the city attorney, it specifies, and the liaison part is completely left out. The liaison,
So what it says, sorry, I had that up and I lost it. So it reads that the city council, the city administrator, or the city attorney can present them. So the way some places do the city council presenting them is in an open session. During the meeting, the council member presents it and argues for that particular ordinance. It doesn't say we have to do it or not do it in that way. The way we determine to do it is through the liaison process, but the council member presents the ordinance within that. If they have an ordinance they want to present, they present it within that format and just not in open session. So it says I did read that somewhere, introduction. So no ordinance or resolution shall be considered by the city unless the introduction of such ordinance or resolution has been requested by motion of the council, requested in writing by the city administrator or the city attorney. So it's the council, the city attorney, or the administrator.
Correct. And that's where the division of the types of ordinances, I think, would be prudent to have. The city administrator and the city attorney, maybe they, wouldn't be best as far as having your three branches of government and you're having your checks and balances. You would definitely not want your executives to be creating laws. That's one of the fundamental checks and balances that we have with our Congress at the state and federal level, is that they're the only ones that are allowed to, bring legislation to the floor. So whenever it comes to, specific legislation that would create criminal offenses, that would create fines and fees and put people in jail, it should come from the city council as the legislatures and not from any executive branch. So that's where I would caution you to consider that before passing this law, because we've seen, if you go back and study history, we've seen countless times where small cities and even large cities have run away with that type of power to where administrations, administrators and executives control who become city council members, control what they can and can't do because they have the power of legislation as well. And that's something, as we grow and as we move out of our positions and other people take our positions, we should definitely consider the power that we're giving them, because not everybody's a good person, and even good people tend to not always do good things. And that's why those checks and balances have to really be codified and solidified in this ordinance. And that's why care has to be taken that kind of power is very strictly and narrowly managed. So that's why I bring that up.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. We will leave open the public hearing if anyone else would like to speak to this ordinance. And we will close the public hearing. Any further discussion or
Yeah,
questions?
so I guess this is towards Mr. Woodman. If we decided 6 months from now, because Mr. Lyles and I have already discussed this just recently about council sponsoring bills, does that have to be in this ordinance? Or can we?
Well, you have a couple options. So the intent of that section, and actually it harkens back to prior language that was in the city code before the code was recodified. So I've talked a couple times before this body about how in 2010 we did a recodification. And a lot of ordinances were repealed at that time that probably shouldn't have been repealed, one of which is our council rules of procedure. So because I'm not a policy person, so I don't set policy, the council does, and the council would be setting policy tonight if this is approved or amended or whatever it is the council decides to do. I looked back at what we had before when proposing this ordinance, and the procedure that council had adopted before on how ordinances are introduced into the council, how resolutions are introduced into the council, is a provision where the city administrator, the city attorney, and the mayor can provide those for council review, or a motion of council is needed to bring those forward for council review. So that's the first thing. The second thing that you're describing, the sponsorship requirement, that's something that we can add to the code. I came from a jurisdiction where they had a sponsorship requirement and they did not follow it. It literally boiled down to somebody in the law department just picked a name out of a hat, and that was who was placed as the sponsor of a bill. And that's because their code required a sponsorship. So we moved away from a sponsorship requirement here because it wasn't in the code prior. And I haven't had a positive experience with that. But that's something we can have here. We can have a discussion about that if it's something this council wants to do. And ultimately, regardless of how the ordinances come to the council, it's the council that's deciding whether or not to approve them, whether or not to amend them, whether or not to send them back to staff for further review, or whether or not to impanel a committee, which has happened before, to study the issue further and bring it back to the council for additional public hearings and additional debate. So really what that section is getting at is how, from a procedural standpoint, how do they get on the agenda? Because right now we do not have, if anyone from the public asks, well, how do these get in front of council? We don't have a provision to point to say, well, this is why. Under this provision, a lot of it's going to come from the administrator. A lot of the bills that are coming forward this evening can be thought of as business-type bills that are generated from the administrator's office. The day-to-day things, like rezoning ordinances, contracts, franchises, those sorts of things. Big legislative changes that the council wants to entertain, council still has a vehicle on that. And if this provision doesn't work, the beauty of what we're doing today is there's now a mechanism for you all to amend that process if you don't agree with it, you don't like it, or if a future council doesn't like it or doesn't agree with it. Right now, we don't have that. We're just based off of prior practice or how we've done things in the past. Now we're codifying what that is to give us an ability to modify it if we need to.
And Mr. Sanders, one of the things we've asked Mr. Woodman to do is to go through all of our ordinances and try to find all those gray areas or the things that are not clear and clear them up so that we have a path to follow, that we're not wandering down something and, well, that's where they used to do it or do this. And that's one of the reasons he's doing some of the things he's doing is to get it to where it's an easy path to follow and there's not going to be such a problem with figuring out how we're doing something.
So yeah, I definitely think we can, like I said, we can come back and discuss that. We've never had a request to have council members present ordinances. That's definitely things other places do, and so we could definitely bring that back and have a discussion on it.
Yeah, I think two reasons why I see it as important is if I bring something to Mr. Lyles or Mr. Colvin and like the design of the lift station, and then you ended up adding to that, but that's a decision that affects everyone in the city, not just the people in District 1. Actually, it's not even in District 1, I don't think, is it? And so it also gives the council members the name of who, okay, well, Jared brought this up, so I need to call him to figure out what's going on with it. And just kind of why I did it, and just provides people, more information to know who to contact to ask the questions. And then if the ones do come from staff, then it's, noted there as well. I do like that idea, knowing where they came from, because if something showed up and it had Miss Graham's name on it, and I thought it was crazy, and I could call Darlene and be like, what's up?
Wouldn't
Why
understand.
are we doing
Why
that?
are you voting for chickens?
Yeah. But like you were saying, that can be added at any time.
That's definitely, yeah, I think this is a codification of our current processes and what we currently do, and if we want to
Gotta
change
start
that, then we
somewhere.
should
There's
follow the
multiple
rules
ways to
listed
skin
here
a
and
cat.
change that, right?
Follow the rules.
I,
Sorry, go ahead, Ms. Sandy.
I think that, Ms. Graham, I do think that it is important to go back through all of our ordinances and make sure that they are purposeful. And that's a great thing to have, the staff do and everything. As far as the sponsorship goes, and as far as somebody's name being on the ordinance before it's passed, is more accountability to the electorate. When you sponsor a bill, your name is on that bill, your name is on that ordinance. And if there is ever second or third or other unintended consequences, then that's how you get voted out. It's like, oh boy, he pushed for this rule, he pushed for this law, look what it's done to our community. We need to vote somebody else in. Or conversely, hey, he sponsored that bill, I sponsored that bill, that's why you should reelect me. So I would argue for the sponsorship as well, because I'm pretty sure good people sitting up on the board, sitting up on the council, are not going to let somebody tag them in an ordinance, that punishes people or fines people, and let them put their name on there without some consternation or, some pushback as to, hey, why are you picking me? Let me look at it first. Let me decide, whether you put my name on it. That way, the staff has to shop the council members and say, hey, here's my 30-second elevator pitch for this ordinance. Make them sell it to you before you put your name on it. Otherwise, there you have the staff running the council instead of the council running the staff. So,
Thank you, Mr. Sandy.
anything else? We're good?
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Were we at questions, or did I close the public hearing?
Yeah.
Did I close the public hearing yet?
You
We were
did.
talking in the middle, okay. All right, got lost. Any other discussion? So, yeah, I think, like Mr. Woodman was saying, this will codify what we currently do, and if you guys want to change that process, you can bring it back, and we will discuss it at that point. Sounds good. Motion to approve,
So made.
Second.
roll call, please.
Justin Orff,
Yes.
Jared Giddens,
Yes.
Aaron Peterson,
Yes.
Darlene Graham,
Yes.
Amy Hookstrat,
Yes.
Sean Lucas.
Yes.
And whenever you're ready.
Second reading, Council Bill Number 2022-028, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa, amending the 2022 annual budget to appropriate funds for the lease of police vehicles.
Mayor, Council, you'll see that the memo hasn't changed at all. It's actually a replication of the first memo that I produced for you. As you know, we are looking at a shortfall in a budgeted line for lease vehicles, and that was due to us bringing those vehicles online much sooner in the year than we anticipated. As a result of that, we're going to be making quite a few more lease payments than we had originally anticipated. And so we're looking at a budgetary amendment of $100,329. With that budgetary amendment, it'll bring that line in up to where we need to make sure that we're covering all of those lease payments for the entire year for the full amount of vehicles that we are anticipating moving in. On a positive note, 6 of those vehicles are here, and they're actively working on getting them in service. We anticipate getting the other 6 vehicles in a very short amount of time, and we're just working through the upfit process. We've been told we may have some delays with upfit and equipment, just because of the kind of environment that we're working in with supply chain issues and such. Any questions?
Any questions? Nope. Thank you, Chief. And we'll open up the public hearing on this item. Close the public hearing. Any further discussion? Motion to approve?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Jared Giddens,
Yes.
Aaron Peters,
Yes.
Darlene Graham,
Yes.
Amy Hookstrat,
Yes.
Sean Lucas,
Yes.
Justin Orr.
Yes.
Second reading Council Bill Number 2022-029, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa establishing a charter review commission to review the city's charter and recommend any proposed amendments thereto.
All right. Mayor, Council, this is the second reading of the ordinance to establish the Home Rule Charter Review Commission. As I mentioned last time, we did open up, I guess, to take forms or to serve on the committee back in December of last year, and that ran through January 2nd or 3rd of this year. I'm very, very pleased to say that we had 39 citizens put in a form, a request to serve on the Home Rule Charter Review Committee. I think what's even more exciting for me is that almost, I'm not going to say 100%, I have to go back and check, but almost 100% of every one of them has agreed to serve on other committees, even if they're not chosen for this committee. So that's pretty exciting that we have a group of citizens that's willing to serve to make their city better. So I'm pretty excited about that. We took all of those requests or forms and we turned them all over to council to seek input from each of you. And based on that input, we're presenting tonight the 9 Home Rule Charter Review Committee recommendations. There are 3 from each district for a total of 9 as laid out in the Home Rule Charter. You'll also see 3 potential replacements. Those, again, are not included in the ordinance, but if any of the 9 can't fulfill their duties, we do have 3 that said that they would be willing to, if council were to select them, to take a place of one of those. So I've included those 3 on the memo. I'll just also mention that overall the recommendations did include 5 men, 4 women, ranging in age from 36 to 72. It includes a prior council member, 3 prior members of they were either originally on the original Home Rule Charter Committee or on our review committee that we had in place last time. And then we have 5 that's never served on a city committee before. So I think we have a pretty diverse group, so I'm pretty excited to get to work with this group. Next steps would be if council does pass this ordinance tonight, we'll be reaching out to each one of those committee members and setting our first meeting date, which will be an orientation. That first one's just going to kind of be an orientation of getting familiar with our Home Rule Charter, how this process is going to work, and that kind of thing, and then we'll get to work. So be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Do the replacements get to attend the meetings, or?
Yeah, anyone can attend the meetings. They're open to the public.
Oh, yeah,
So
that's right.
if they choose to, they
Okay.
can come, and which, that would be a great recommendation. That way, if they were to have to step in, then
Yeah.
they could do that. But absolutely, yeah. Yep.
Thanks.
And then a couple of them had asked about that and being involved in it, and we're like, for open meetings, you're more than welcome to attend.
Yep.
Keep up to speed on it, yeah. Any other questions?
All right, thank you.
you, Jimmy. And we'll open up the public hearing on this. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, Linda Tout, Nixa. Just a quick question. Where can I find what this committee is about? I mean, what are they going to be doing?
There we go.
Okay.
They have the opportunity to review the entire charter if they so choose, but specifically, council has asked that they at least look at a couple of sections that have come up for discussion recently, if that's what.
Oh, for the Nixa charter?
Yes.
Oh, gotcha.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
When it said Nixa home charter, I didn't,
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, we're a Nixa
it's-
home rule, so we have a charter for our entire community, and they're going to review that.
okay,
Yep,
thank you.
you bet.
Still learning the.
Absolutely. You bet.
No problem. And we'll leave the public hearing open. Coming up.
Yeah, you know this one's near and dear to my heart here. Ron Sanders, here, I'm here in Nixa. It's a good thing. I'm glad that you guys decided to, collect up a bunch of names and select names, select people. And I'm glad to see that there's a whole bunch of people that have never done anything before on here. You get fresh view, fresh point of view, fresh mindset, and that's a good thing. Are there any requirements as far as so many meetings before the year's out? Or is that up to the committee itself?
That's up to the committee itself.
So they'll
probably
be
the
able,
first meeting, they'll designate a chairman, and then that chairman will, with the rest of them, set the rules for how they want to proceed.
will they be able to conduct committee business outside of committee meetings?
It's a good question. Not committee
think so.
business. I don't know that would they be under the same sunshine requirements as?
Yes, they're going to
Okay.
be they're going to be a public governmental body of the city. So they're going to be subject to the Sunshine Law and will not conduct any public business outside of meetings.
And the last question is, will the meeting, the meetings will be published on the calendar, correct? But will the meeting minutes afterwards, when will those be published after the meetings? How long after the meetings do they have to publish the meeting minutes?
Typically, the meeting minutes are prepared after the meeting is conducted and then up for approval at the next meeting. It would be similar to how council's minutes are approved.
So the meeting minutes will be coming back here for approval each time they have a
They'll be
meeting?
coming back to
No,
themselves.
Themselves.
They'll be coming back to themselves. Since we won't be at the meetings, we won't
Okay.
know if they're correct
So-
or not. So they'll approve their minutes like we approve ours.
So they could have a meeting, the minutes will be written up, they could have another meeting 4 months later, and then they'd approve the minutes, and nobody would really know what happened at that until the 4 months later after they approved the minutes.
Conceivably, but yeah, I think their idea is to meet more often than that. There's no reason they would meet that
Just-
infrequently.
Just seems like, with such a big thing, what would you say? If you're not at the meeting, I guess you're not gonna really know what's going on until the next meeting. And having the meeting minutes and having it open and everything, will it be televised? Will it be publicized on the Nixa?
I don't think we were
YouTube.
planning on televising them. We would have
As
to
far as I
ask
know,
the
we're not going
members,
to
yeah.
stream them.
Yeah.
But anyone can attend. It's going to be an open meeting just like this.
Okay. Would it be possible to get that in there for streaming or at least for posting video of the meeting afterwards? Or would there be something to pretend,
We have to see about staff availability. We'd have to have somebody to come and run the equipment and stuff during the meeting, which normally we wouldn't have. We don't do that for P and Z. We don't do that. We just don't do that for subcommittee meetings. Because in the end, they come back here with whatever their results are anyway. So all of that is then public at that point, any things that they want to bring back at that point.
okay, last question. Where will the meetings be held?
Here.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Usually they do them on the floor. They don't do them up here. They sit in kind of a circle and discuss
It'll
that
be
way.
similar to the committee meetings that you attended.
And we'll leave the public hearing open. And close the public hearing. Any further discussion? Accept a motion to approve,
So made. Second.
and roll call, please.
Aaron Peterson,
Yes.
Darlene Graham.
Yes.
Amy Hookstrat.
Yes.
Sean Lucas,
Yes.
Justin Orff,
Yes.
Jared Giddens.
Yes.
And while we're on that subject, we had talked before when we were when we were changing the speed limit requirements about doing a traffic board or committee or something. So that kind of goes back to what that first gentleman was talking about. Is that something we've looked into or put any more thought on?
We haven't, I haven't looked at it any farther as far as bringing it back to you for recommended for a committee, which we could certainly do. If that was the case, I misunderstood.
No, I just want to maybe
Internally,
like have
we
a
do.
discussion,
Yeah,
bring back some information about how that works in other places.
Okay.
And we can have a discussion about it and kind of
Absolutely.
see if that's something we're interested
Yeah,
in
we
bringing
can
back.
do that. Yeah, currently.
We got a lot of new people
do an
now. We can put them on
internal
stuff.
group of us, So, yeah, but we'll do that.
No problem. Thank you. All right. Sorry, Cindy. Move on to the resolutions.
Resolution number 2022-031, a resolution of the Council of the City of Nixa authorizing the sale or distribution of alcohol on city property and authorizing a multi-day event for the proposed 2022 Sucker Days special event.
Good evening. The Nixa City Code in regulating special events authorizes staff to go ahead and either issue or deny permits for special events on the basis of whether they meet certain codified conditions or stipulations, with two exceptions. And those two exceptions are if your special event is going to involve the distribution and consumption of alcohol on public property, or if your special event is going to endure over multiple days. That decision is not delegated to staff. Instead, those have to come back to City Council for authorization. So this resolution would authorize the 2022 Nixa Sucker Days to have the distribution and consumption of alcohol on public property, that being a city parking lot where I believe it customarily is done, at least for multiple years now, same location, and also for that special event to endure over multiple days, those dates being May 19th, 2022 through May 22nd, 2022. This resolution, of course, does not authorize the special event itself. This is being brought to you now as kind of a solution to a problem that has been experienced in years prior, where there's this chicken and egg situation between the city and State Division of Liquor Control. State wants to know that the city has approved the distribution and consumption of alcohol before they do their thing, and likewise, we want to know that they've approved it before we do our thing. This resolution kind of addresses that in that it grants conditional approval for these things to happen so that the state can see that, then they can release all of their permitting and documentation, and makes it all move a little bit smoother. So staff is recommending the approval of this resolution.
Nick, I have a question. I'm working part-time at the chamber right now. Do I need to recuse myself or just abstain from voting?
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
But in the
Chamber doesn't
future, if you
benefit
have
from the
questions.
alcohol sales.
I know
Sir
they're
Tom,
not doing it, so I just wanted, Chris told me to ask, so.
I would think.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. And we'll open up the public hearing if you would like to speak to this item. Mr. Russell's not here, so.
The CCC Sertoma Club is one who runs the booth.
Right. This is also for the event in total, though.
Yeah, yeah.
It's because it's for the multi-day part as well.
Yes.
But I don't think it matters too much.
And they're in the process of getting that permit right now.
So I think Chris has everything in hand. I believe we'll have another great successful event for Nixa Sucker Day, speaking on Mr. Russell's behalf. So did I close the public hearing? I think I did. Okay, I will now. Thanks, Chris. Since I did the Chris talking part. Any other discussion? Motion to approve?
So made.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm opposed, these are fun.
Resolution number 2022-032, a resolution of the Council of the City of Nixa authorizing the city administrator to execute a contract with Ewing Signal Construction, LLC, for the certain traffic signal improvements at the intersection of Main Street and Aldersgate Drive.
Travis?
Thank you, Mayor. This is a resolution authorizing a bid award for scheduled maintenance to the traffic signal at Aldersgate and Main. This is a proactive maintenance item that we identified as part of the CIP process to replace the control panel within that signal. It has reached the end of its scheduled life cycle, and so to ensure continued smooth operation of both the signal operations and the crosswalk operations, it is necessary to go ahead and replace this item to ensure that the signal continues to operate as intended. The bid award for Ewing Signal was within the budgeted amount, and they were the low bidder on the process. Staff does recommend approval of the resolution as presented.
Are we missing a word or an entire line? Says current components controlling signal timing, the newly installed crosswalk signal on Main Street and, oh, conflict, okay, I get it now. I thought it was supposed to say Main Street and Aldersgate.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
3 items,
I got
signal
it.
timing, crosswalk, and then the conflict management part of
Okay.
it.
My poor reading. Any questions? Nope. Thank you, Travis.
All right.
And we'll open up a public hearing. Close the public hearing. Any further discussion? Motion to approve.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And last one.
Resolution number 2022-033, a resolution of the Council of the City of Nixa authorizing the city administrator to execute a contract with D&E Plumbing and Heating Incorporated for the replacement of stormwater infrastructure along Morning Drive.
All right. Last year, we had a issue with an existing stormwater pipe in Wasson subdivision on Morning Glory Drive. That stormwater pipe, a 30-inch pipe in diameter, collapsed. The homeowner did contact us. The street department was able to make temporary repairs to it to allow us the time necessary to budget this item as part of the 2022 CIP budget. The repairs have been holding, however, the pipe is in complete failure and does need to be replaced. So we have provided a bid out for the project. D&E Plumbing provided the low bid at $111,600, which was within the budgeted amount. They are the low bidder, and staff does recommend the bid award to D&E Plumbing to allow for that pipe's replacement and to continue operations of the stormwater system for that phase of Wasson.
Any questions? Thank you, Travis. And we will open up the public hearing. Close public hearing. Any further discussion? Motion to approve.
So made.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. And that's all we got. Anything else from staff? Anything else? No. Anything else from council? There's a little event this weekend called Nixpo.
I'm supposed to tell you about that.
Yeah, you want to do it?
Yeah,
I
go
can do it. I gave you a
I'm
pause
sorry.
there.
No, I forgot because we've been working very hard, believe me. Chris wanted me to remind you all that, yes, Nixpo is this weekend. It's at the high school. We've got 111 booths. We added a couple just this week. It's really exciting to see a lot of them that are coming in. It's going to be a fantastic event where we're hoping the weather would be kind of misty and cold, but it's not. It's going to be a beautiful day. But come anyway. Parking is available. We'll have shuttle services available if you'd like to get a ride, park somewhere else and ride. There'll be signs out about it. It starts at 9. We're done at 3. Come and see us. It's going to be a good time. It's adult trick-or-treating. Come on up.
Going to be a great event. Anything else?
And the Nixa boys basketball team headed to the Final Four. So hopefully on Friday, I get to leave the Nixpo set up early to go watch them play in the championship game
Oh, yeah, because they're playing in town.
at 4
That
o'clock.
helps tremendously.
4 o'clock, championship game, yeah.
You can come later.
So I'm buying the pizza for setup, so I'm going to the basketball game.
Okay. We're working on that today. Who's bringing food?
That's me.
All right.
Okay.
And I do appreciate the comments that I received on behalf of the police department to share with them at their awards banquet. It was all well received.
I hear it was a nice banquet. Good work, Chief.
It was a very nice banquet. Chief picked out the venue, and it was really, really nice.
Yeah, we really can't thank the alumni enough for what they did. The amount of money that they raised, they were able to do door prizes. We had a really nice venue and a nice dinner, and I can tell you that I got several positive comments from my staff about how much they enjoyed the actual event itself. So thank you to the alumni.
Keep saying how nice it is. Jeff will want to start a Citizen Street Academy, and then he can.
That'll be a bad idea.
All right. If nothing else, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So made.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
This is important.